welcome Sally Jenkins. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So I'm a sports columnist for the Washington Post. For those of you who may not know that, I've been at the Washington Post since 2000. Although it's my second tour, I first got to the Post about 2 years out of college as a reporter in the sports section back in around 1984. I was there till 1990. Left for a while to go to Sports Illustrated magazine, and then came back to the Washington Post as a columnist. The job of columnist is really quite different from being a reporter or a feature writer because it gives you the platform to express your opinion. In other forms of journalism, you are forming judgments, but they're supposed to be balanced judgments, discernment of the facts, presentation of the facts in the most neutral and balanced way as possible. Although in feature stories, you want to do some good writing and you want to get the reader engaged, but a columnist really picks a lane. Your job is to form your opinion of what the smartest angle on any particular issue is, and then argue it for all you're worth. And I learned this pretty early in the column writing experience back in 2000, when there was a guy named Casey Martin, a golfer, who sued for the right to play on the PGA Tour while riding in a in a golf cart. And the case actually made it to the Supreme Court, and the court had to decide whether golf was a sport and whether Casey Martin had the right to try to compete using a golf cart when everyone around him would be walking the course. And I called my friend Mike Lupica, who's a longtime sports columnist for the New York Daily News. And you guys may have seen him on MSNBC here and there. And I said, Mike, I don't know really what to write here. Maybe I should just write a column that says that there's agreements on both sides. And he said, that's not your job, stupid. Your job is to pick a side and give it your all. So that's the job, really. And if you look at really the best opinion columnists, whether we're talking about sports or politics, whether you're talking about, George Will, writing in the Washington Post about our political elections, or Michael Gerson, or Eugene Robinson, who write about social justice issues or political issues, you will see that they are making decisions about what they really believe, and then arguing them and trying to win you over to their side of the argument. So in sports, particularly with social justice issues in the last year, with George Floyd, with Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, it was very, very important not just to know what side you were going to take, but those issues were so complicated in some ways, but to really know why you felt the way you felt about them. Why do you believe what you believe? And so the job of columnists in those instances was to really help yourself and other Americans, other readers, understand, why do you feel the way you feel about Colin Kaepernick? Why do you feel so strongly about the anthem in a stadium and whether it's appropriate to take a knee or not? And unfortunately, some people didn't achieve clarity. The NFL owners in particular didn't achieve clarity on that issue until a man died in the street with a knee on the back of his neck. And when those things happen, as a columnist, another part of your job is to seize that moment and really crystallize what just happened for the reader, and to understand to people, and to understand and explain to people why you may feel the way you feel on this issue. Because we don't always know why we feel the way we feel. We know we're angry, we know we feel a sense of injustice, or we know we're excited by the final score and what happened on the field. We don't necessarily investigate really deeply what's bugging you, the most about those things. And I'll kind of wind up this opening statement by saying the very best opinion columns, in my view, the very best commentary, which is what this is the commentary in which the writer has absolutely 100% understood what's bugging them and that feeling, scratch that itch so deeply that it's really, really clear and really powerful when you lay it out on a page in words. So that's what I do for a living.
That's awesome. Thank you. We'll take questions, but I just had a young man who's away because we have been talking, he couldn't make it today, because we have been talking about Title IX and the NCAA tournament and your columns there we've read, but he kind of brought it forward and wanted your opinion on Mr. Emmerich's $2.7 million contract with the NCAA and his extension of that contract. We talked a little bit about him.
Yeah.
What your feelings may be on that.
You know, I'm just so disappointed and so I wouldn't say angry, but disgusted, really. You know, so the way the NCAA operates is not always obvious to the rank and file college football or college basketball viewer. The NCAA has what's called a board of governors, and the board of governors, Mark Emmert is the president, but the board of governors really makes the decisions, and they are a bunch of presidents and chancellors from major schools around the country. And the board of governors, the president of Georgetown University is one of them. He's on the board of governors. And the board of governors really hides behind Mark Emmert to a certain extent. Mark Emmert makes $2.75 million a year in order to take the crap for the board of governors. It's not dissimilar to Roger Goodell's job as commissioner of the NFL. Roger Goodell is essentially there to take to wear a flak vest and take the incoming fire for the NFL owners in a lot of instances. And that's very much Mark Emmert's job. His job is to go out there and to try to pacify the audience on behalf of the board of governors. And so the board of governors obviously rewarded him for doing that, when in fact the board of governors should be investigating the need for a total overhaul of the organization in light of the fact that Congress is about to rewrite all of their rules. And I'll explain one more thing about the NCAA that you guys probably are not all that aware of as viewers or fans. And that is that what really underpins the NCAA is a contract with CBS to televise March Madness. And that contract is in the billions of dollars. And when the NCAA Board of Governors made its most recent agreement with CBS and Turner, which is also part of the CBS contract, they agreed to accept so much money from CBS Turner that it granted CBS Turner so many proprietary rights that really a lot of times the decision-making process is being run by CBS and Turner and not so much the NCAA. So when you have an instance like the women's basketball tournament and the controversy that happened just last month with the women's basketball tournament realizing that they were being treated really shabbily compared to their male counterparts, one of the reasons that happened is not because of sexism, but because of the financials in that contract. CBS and Turner have a lot of proprietary rights over March Madness, and they don't want a competitor, ESPN, using March Madness or building an event that could be a competitor to their viewers, their time, space, and their advertisers. So a lot of times in sports, what you think are moral issues are really financial issues. And that's true in the NFL, NCAA, and it's true in the Olympic movement. There are very, very large amounts of money at stake here that can make it difficult to make moral decisions or rational decisions. I always say that when there are irrational amounts of money at stake, it's very hard to make a rational decision. And so the Board of Governors' decision to extend Mark Emmert's contract looks very irrational. He's not a good leader. He's not a good spokesman. He has made some poor decisions, and the structure that he has built is very, very much behind the times. But there's so much money there, and the Board of Governors is so content with that money, and so grateful to Emmert for taking all the crap, that they made an irrational decision.
Okay, thank you. Who's got something? Everybody prepared a bunch of questions, Sally. So
Okay.
who's ready? Just raise your hand. Or yeah, okay. Patrick Moore up top. Patrick, thank you.
What is your favorite Washington sports team to write about?
Oh, well, it varies, you know, with personalities. Sports are very personality driven. So some years if there's an intriguing personality, I mean, the Nats were the most fun ever, right? That run was so great, Baby Shark and all that stuff. I mean, how could you not enjoy them? I guess, the Washington football team's saga under Dan Snyder has not been all that enjoyable to write about. It's a lot more fun to write about a winner, but it has been sort of riveting in its horribleness at times. And I will say this, I think there's a real misunderstanding that journalists like negative stories. That's not true, especially in sports. Actually, we sell a lot more newspapers and we get a lot more viewers online when they're and when on a nice run, and they have a good coach and a good locker room. It's absolutely killed the interest in the team. If you look at our numbers right now, even though Ron Rivera appears to have them on the upswing, there's a real drag on the numbers in our readership of the Washington Football Club. I don't get nearly as many readers lately as I did, say, 5 years ago. The long time erosion of trust in the franchise has really eroded the audience, and we can see it in our newspaper. So football is probably my favorite day in, day out sport. So I would say the Washington Football Club, but it's not always the most, exciting or enjoyable subject. But it is the richest and the deepest in some ways. It's tremendously interesting. It's very instructive to analyze what makes an organization toxic and what makes an organization successful. And why can't a Super Bowl winning coach like a Mike Shanahan turn it around with any sustained success? And can Ron Rivera do it where others have been unable to? There's CEOs all over the country who'd like the answers to those questions.
Great, thanks.
Excuse me.
Ava, thank you, Ava.
My question was.
Can you turn your volume up? I'll turn mine down.
Oh, but aren't they connected to all?
That's okay. I'm down. Yeah. One second.
Okay, I'm Ava, and my question was, how does it feel to be the first woman inducted into the National Sportscasters Hall of Fame? And do you think that by this happening, you're a role model for young women looking to go into the sports world?
First of all, it makes you feel older. It's an honor. It's very flattering. It's nice to be the first at something. That's the better feeling. It's not so much the woman thing as the first thing. Sports writers mostly write about people who finish first and who win prizes and things like that. And we very rarely have the personal experience of actually being first at anything. So that's an interesting experience. And so it was lovely. As far as being a role model, I guess I'm aware of that. I certainly had them when I was in my 20s. There were some pioneers. I'm kind of the second wave. The first wave were of women who really started covering the NFL or covering being columnists. There was a woman named Leslie Visser, who was the first woman to cover an NFL franchise. She wrote about the Boston Globe. She was a great friend and very generous when I was coming up. And the same thing is true with a woman named Diane K. Shaw, who was the first really prominent female sports columnist, and she worked out for the LA Herald Examiner. So women like that were actually very, very good to me when I was young. So I'm less conscious of what young women may think of me than I am of what I think of them, and giving them the kind of generosity that I received when I was their age. We have a super talented staff at the Washington Post. I mean, Candace Buckner had a great story just yesterday about Black sports agents trying to sign white athletes. Chelsea Janes has been one of the best baseball writers in the country. I mean, it's the most fun part of being in my position now at the Washington Post is seeing, you know, all the major beats at our paper almost are held by women, young women writers who are really so talented. So, I mean, that's kind of thrilling, to tell you the truth. You know, I was one of the only women in the press box when I started, and now it's like rows of women. So that's very cool. I mean, terrifically cool. I'm 60. I turned 60 this year, and I've been doing it since I was 20. And one of the benefits of being 60 is that you get to see something like that, a real explosion.
Connor, thank you.
I'm Connor.
Hi, Connor.
Hi. Did you play sports when you were younger? And if so, did that have any influence on what you did in college leading up to you being a sports analyst?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did play sports in high school. I grew up with two brothers. I have a twin brother and a brother who's 1 year younger. And they used to play a game called Chicago Bears, which consisted of one of them shouting Chicago Bears, and then one would hit me from the left and one would hit me from the right, and they would crunch me. So I played a lot of football with them. I played a lot of touch football, and that turned into tackle football. I played high school basketball, high school volleyball, and high school soccer and high school softball. But then in college, I became a reader and a smoker. I didn't play college sports. So to my regret, actually, I would have done that different. But yeah, it's certainly, absolutely. I mean, I think the experience of competition is something that the job of sports writer, you sit in a chair and you try to imagine how it feels to be an actor and a participant. And to the degree that you have experienced that yourself, I think it's important, and so I don't think it's a prerequisite for the job, though. When I first started, be sports writers because they never played the game. Well, I mean, George Will never played baseball, but he's one of the great commentators on baseball. He didn't play Major League Baseball anyway. There's always going to be a separation between a Tom Brady and someone who played even high school football. There is something that those people at that level are doing that none of us can properly understand. And so in that respect, I don't think it matters in the least whether you played the game in high school or in grade school or in college. It is a very mysterious thing, what separates the true elites. It's a very mysterious thing why there are so many college basketball players who played this tournament in March who will never make it in the NBA, why the percentages are so small. Tom Brady, his throwing coach, Tom House, told me just the other day, he said, what really separates a Breeze or Tom Brady can play quarterback in the league for as long as they do. And it's what will separate a Mac Jones potentially or a Trey Lance is that they're not looking to get 15 or 20% better. They're looking to get 1 or 2% better. I mean, Tom Brady spent weeks working with Tom House on the rotation of his throwing motion in order to get 0.7 of a second quicker in his release and his ball speed as he's driving the ball downfield. I mean, those are the margins we're talking about. And that experience, I don't think anyone can have except people at their level. And what's weird is that they recognize each other across multiple sports. A Peyton Manning and a Tom Brady understand each other in a way that nobody else possibly can. And a Michael Jordan, the reason why you see all of them play golf together so much, Michael Jordan is playing golf with, or Tiger Woods and Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, because they like to cross-reference, they like to compare notes, and they like to see how obsessive guys are in other sports and to understand maybe a little bit more about themselves and each other. Good question, though.
Thank you.
Okay, who's up? Okay, Caitlin Rasher is here. Let me just turn mine down, Caitlin, okay? You good?
Is it work? Okay. Hi.
I,
Since you're an opinion writer, do other people's opinions like get to you a lot, or like how have you learned to kind of like cope with all the people who disagree with your opinion?
that's such a good question. That really is that's an excellent question. And the answer is you have a thick skin and you have to enjoy almost the disagreement. Because first of all, you're not going to be 100%. Your judgments are going to be wrong. It takes a lot of self-appraisal and a lot of self-examination, and you can't have a temper about it, and you cannot be thin-skinned about it, because you have to remain open to the possibility that you may have it wrong. And in fact, that's where some of the best stuff can come from. I mean, I've done 180s on certain issues because I learned. My friend Tony Kornheiser, who was a great sports columnist for the Washington Post for years before he became an ESPN television figure, he told me once, you're only as smart as the people you talk to. And what he meant by that was, even when you're writing an opinion or forming an opinion, it has to be an informed opinion. Anybody can stand around and shout. Anybody can, argue pig-headedly one side of an issue. The trick is to do it in a really informed way and in a really intelligent way that is persuasive to other people. And if you're not being persuasive to other people, then you have to examine that. So, I mean, and the other thing is, like, you don't go into any sort of public facing job without understanding, particularly in this era of social media, that you're not going to get tomatoes thrown at you on Twitter or on Instagram. These venues and platforms they provide an anonymity that allows people to behave in ways that they wouldn't in a personal interaction, right? It's just really, really easy to slime somebody when you're invisible and sitting behind a laptop, as opposed to when you're meeting them face to face. And so you have to be prepared for that and understand the reality of that. I do not have a Twitter account because I find it so toxic, and I also find it affecting sometimes the intelligence of my opinions. I do have Instagram, but I'm not on Twitter or Facebook because I actually think they're graffiti. They're closer to graffiti than they are to anything else. I monitor them at times, particularly Twitter for breaking news, but I'm not on it, and I don't, because I just don't think that what happens on Twitter leads to the most intelligent 800 words or 1,000 words, which is the length of a column.
Great, thank you. Who's up? There were a lot of great questions. What you guys?
Yeah, you guys are great. These are really good questions.
Okay, we got Jackson, then we'll get Avery, who's here. Jackson, go ahead.
I am Jackson. I just wanted to know, what is something you knew like before you went and became a sports analyst? Like, what is something that
Yes,
you knew?
I think probably always going to be a journalist of some kind. My dad was a sports writer for Sports Illustrated magazine, so I grew up around it, and it's what I knew. But I thought quite seriously about not going into sports. I actually spent some time as a what they call a metro reporter down in Los Angeles, where I covered hit and run accidents and fires. There was a famous murder case in the Hollywood Hills. I mean, I kind of did that, some of those stories for a while. And I went back to sports because of two things. One is it was depressing, and sports was just a lot more fun. And secondly, I kind of knew it more deeply. Now, I've gone outside of sports periodically. I write occasional political profiles for the Washington Post. I was involved in the Hurricane Katrina coverage and the Hurricane Sandy coverage for the newspaper. But generally, it was funny. I was offered an opportunity when COVID came to actually move off of sports and join the regular opinion section during the pandemic. And I actually declined because I thought it was important to stay in the sports section and to find out what we could cover when there were no sports going on. Like, was sports still going to be a relevant topic? And if so, how? Seemed like an interesting and important thing to try to do. Yeah, I've done it and I enjoy it, but it's just, I always come back to sports. It's the most interesting thing in the world to me. And I actually think it's quite important.
And
Thank you.
Sally, we've got Avery right here. Just give us 1 second. You want to turn up the volume, maybe?
Hi, I'm Avery.
Hi, Avery.
Who is your favorite athlete to cover? Who has been your favorite athlete to cover?
Oh, I've had so many. Andre Agassi was great fun to cover because he was just, did you guys watch him? I don't know how much you guys may have watched him play tennis, but he might have been a little bit before your time, but he was great fun because he was a very splashy, controversial character, very explosive on the tennis court. So I enjoyed him because he was, in addition to being splashy, he was very self-aware and he gave great interviews. The ones you end up really enjoying covering are self-aware and enjoy talking to the press and are willing to sort of give you a little bit of themselves. I've loved covering Tom Brady just because, not because I know him particularly, which I don't. I've talked to him, I've interviewed him. I enjoy covering him because it's quite apparent he's the greatest who ever played the game. And you feel privileged to be able to sort of watch that and chronicle it as a sports writer. So many of us sit around going, well, God, I wish I had seen Babe Ruth hit a baseball, right? Or, I mean, if you know anything or if you enjoy any kind of sports history, there may be something you wish you had seen. Well, we're seeing, whether it was, I wish I had seen, Julius Erving play basketball or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar play basketball. We're seeing it with Tom Brady. Our generation gets to live through one of those historical athletes. And so I've enjoyed that very much. There's nothing, excuse me. The same thing is true of Michael Phelps as a swimmer or Katie Ledecky as a swimmer. You almost feel an electrical current coming out of these athletes that are going to go down as best evers. And that's just tremendously exciting. And the ability to, first of all, attend their events, describe them, and try to figure out what makes them great is just really, you get such a charge out of it, but it's not always the great ones that you enjoy the most. I mean, Andre Agassi was not the greatest tennis player in the world at the time. Pete Sampras was. I got a chance to cover both Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova when they were at their peak, and they were the two of the greatest ever. And you knew it while you were watching them, and you knew that with 18 Grand Slam titles each, they were taking tournaments away from each other that might have put them even deeper in the record book. And so that made the rivalry even more gripping. So things like that, those are my favorite experiences. And the last thing I'll tell you is there's something really extraordinary at an Olympics about watching an athlete has prepared for 4 years for a performance that might last 4 minutes or 14 seconds. Usain Bolt, getting that gold medal that he's been training for 4 years for, turning himself into a human timepiece, right? And when an athlete has trained for 4 years and then they funnel that experience and that training into a window that's about this big, and they bring their very best at the moment when it counts the most, that's an extraordinary experience to cover.
We want to respect your time, Sal. We have one more question here
Sure.
from Emma.
We're good.
I'll take it away.
Hi, I'm Emma, and my question is, what is one piece of advice you would give to anyone who's wants to go into sports writing and sports journalism?
I'm sorry, you froze a little bit there. I lost your question. One piece of advice
That you would give to someone who wants to go into sports journalism.
Okay. Well, my first piece of advice is read. You can't learn to be a good journalist and a good writer without just reading a lot, and enjoying reading and reading with a little bit of a purpose. And when I say read with a purpose, read to study technique. One of the things I did early on, I'm a big Stephen King fan. I've been a big Stephen King fan since I was in high school. I've read pretty much everything he's not everything he's written, because he's written so much, but a lot of what he's written. And Stephen King, he's a horror writer and a supernatural writer, but Stephen King does something that every sports writer has to learn how to do. And that is to hold the reader in suspense when you already know what's likely to happen. So someone reading me in the Washington Post probably already knows who won the game the night before, right? So if you guys pick up the paper or you go online to read me on what happened between the Washington Football Club and the Philadelphia Eagles, you already know the final score. My job is to make it somehow interesting and suspenseful despite that. Well, nobody does that better than Stephen King. If you read a Stephen King suspense novel or horror novel, his technique as a writer strings the reader along. You'll see shorter sentences. You'll see how he paces sentences on the page. If you look at the length of the sentences, the number of words in the sentence, the way he paragraphs, you can learn a lot about how to write for a newspaper in a suspenseful or interesting way, and there's almost a gravitational pull or a tow line that tows a reader through a really, really good story. A really good story draws you along. You find yourself reading it. How many times do you start to read something and it bogs down and you just quit on it, right? Because it's boring, or it's too dense, or it's just not saying anything that you can really discern. A Stephen King really pulls you a piece of writing, whether it's a short story or a 900-page novel. And so that would be my biggest advice for anyone trying to learn to write or be any kind of journalist.
Great. Unfortunately, we have to cut it there and let you get to work.
Okay.
Could I just ask one favor? Could you stay on the line for 1 second? I just have a question to ask you when the kids are gone.
Sure.
If that's okay.
Absolutely.
You guys, your thank yous, audio on. Here we go. And you're out. I got attendance. Go, go, go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Great questions. So smart.
Oh God, we have adults here, Sally.
Okay. Hi, everyone. They seem like fun to work with.
I just had a quick one.
Sure.
Would you mind, we kind of crushed you with emails before. Would you mind if just that class sent you about 25 thank yous?
No, that's fine. That's
You
fine.
sure?
I enjoyed getting those notes.
All right, that's a
Okay.
quick. And then to whatever degree you're comfortable, we always give some kind of gift to you. So,
Oh,
something
don't do that.
something exciting is coming. But I just was wondering what address would be best to send you.
Yeah.
You can do that.
I'll give you, I'm at home. It's COVID, right? So it's 20 Shelter
Okay.
Island
Okay.
Avenue,
Okay.
Sag Harbor,
Okay.
New York, 11963.
Perfect. All right.
Yay, Long Island.
Yeah. Has
I'm from
everybody read
Babylon.
all those books on your wall there? Has everybody read all those?
Well, I've taken the liberty of stopping at the little libraries and taken all the books out of my, so we try to read, and Stephen King on writing is right over here. So I'm going to give
Oh, good.
I'm going to give that to Emma right now.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great.
Well,
Good deal.
thank you. Thank
Very
you.
nice to meet everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Sally.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Here.
I really like her.
You do like her?
Yeah.
Oh, they're saying they like you.